Imagine, for a moment, that everything you've ever been taught about happiness, success, and fulfillment is a lie. Picture this. You're standing in the wreckage of your life. Everything you thought you knew about who you are, what you want, and what you deserve shattered at your feet. And then, in the quiet aftermath, you realize something far more unsettling. The greatest lessons of your life didn't come from the moments of joy, but from the pain, the tears, the heartbreak, the struggles. Those were the moments that shaped you, that forced you to face truths you could never have learned in comfort. At first, you push it away. You tell yourself that pain is something to avoid, something to fix. Society has conditioned you to believe that suffering is an aberration, an unnecessary evil. But then it hits you, the weight of this uncomfortable realization every single time. You faced your deepest fears, your darkest moments. You came out the other side stronger, wiser, more aware of yourself and the world around you. The pain wasn't just something. You survived it. Was the very force that transformed you. What if everything you've been taught is backwards? What if pain isn't the enemy, but the most powerful teacher you'll ever have? What if your greatest growth, your deepest wisdom, comes not from avoiding suffering, but from embracing it? You've spent your life running from pain, hoping it would just disappear. But now, deep down, there's a question that can't be ignored. What if the very thing you feared the most is the key to your transformation? The paradox is unavoidable. Pain is the one thing you've been taught to avoid. Yet it's the one thing that holds the power to change everything. Your mind fights this truth, but a voice inside you knows it's true. Could it be that your suffering is not a burden, but the hidden catalyst for the most profound shifts in your life? The question lingers, what if pain, in all its raw, uncomfortable, and sometimes brutal forms, is the most important part of your journey? But why has society conditioned you to fear it? Why has pain become a thing to resist, to run from, to fix, rather than a necessary tool for growth? What is it about suffering that makes it so difficult to accept as part of the human experience, let alone as a guide? The truth is, you've been taught to believe that life should be easy, that happiness should be the ultimate goal. But what if this belief has kept you from understanding the true nature of growth? What if the secret to your power, to the strength you seek, lies not in avoiding pain, but in fully embracing it as the teacher it truly is? This is the great question, the tension that demands your attention. What if the very thing you fear most is the one thing that will set you free? Now, let's dive into why this truth has been hidden from us. Let's explore how our culture, our psychology, and even our deepest beliefs about life have shaped the way we see suffering, and why we must confront this hidden force in order to unlock the lessons pain is waiting to teach us. To understand why pain has become the ultimate taboo, we must first confront the deep-seated beliefs that lie at the heart of human experience, beliefs ingrained in us by society, culture, and our own psychological makeup. For centuries, we've been taught to fear suffering, to resist it at all costs, and to view it as something to avoid, to fix, to escape. But what if this reflexive rejection of pain is not only misguided, but also a form of self-deception? The roots of this rejection lie in the very nature of the human psyche. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's a survival instinct that has served us well in the past, helping us to protect ourselves from physical harm and ensuring the propagation of the species. But this instinct, once applied to our emotional and psychological lives, creates a distortion, a false narrative that pain is inherently negative. something to be eradicated from our experience. The problem begins here, when we are taught to avoid pain. We are also taught to avoid the deeper, more uncomfortable truths that lie within it. Pain is not just an emotion or a physical sensation. It's a signal, a call to attention. It's an invitation to grow, to confront what we've been ignoring, to change the patterns of our lives that no longer serve us. And yet, because we see pain as a threat, we never stop to ask, what is it trying to teach me? To explore this, let's turn to the work of Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. Jung argued that much of human suffering stems from what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we repress or deny. These are the aspects of our personality, our desires, our past experiences, and even our fears that we refuse to acknowledge, because they don't fit into the image we have of ourselves. In his view, suffering arises when we try to push these darker, hidden parts of ourselves out of conscious awareness. And yet, the very act of repression, of denying these parts of ourselves, creates the very suffering we wish to avoid. Jung believed that the path to wholeness required a confrontation with the shadow. It was only by facing the parts of ourselves that we find most uncomfortable, our weaknesses, our flaws, our deepest fears, that we could achieve true integration and self-realization. Pain, in this sense, becomes a doorway. The suffering we experience isn't an accident or an inconvenience. It's an invitation to dive deeper into the recesses of our psyche, to uncover what has been hidden, and to embrace the full spectrum of who we are. But this is not an easy process. Nietzsche, another philosopher who explored the nature of suffering, famously said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." In his philosophy, suffering is not something to be avoided, but something that can give meaning to life. For Nietzsche, the experience of pain can serve as a crucible, something that burns away the illusions we hold about ourselves, forcing us to confront our deepest vulnerabilities. In this context, suffering becomes a kind of spiritual fire, one that refines us and makes us stronger. Yet, despite these philosophical insights, we live in a world that still clings to the idea that life should be easy, that happiness should be the goal. The modern, consumer-driven culture we live in teaches us to maximize pleasure and minimize discomfort. The messages are everywhere: self-care, instant gratification, and the promise that we can buy our way out of suffering. But in doing so, we only continue to run from the very thing that could offer us the most profound wisdom. This collective mindset has left us disconnected from the deeper truths that suffering holds. We have been conditioned to view emotional pain as a sign of weakness, something to be eradicated with quick fixes or distractions. But this very mindset is the root of much of our collective misery. When we refuse to engage with our pain, we end up living half-lives, lives that are superficial, disconnected, and devoid of true meaning. We live in a culture of avoidance, and in doing so, we cut ourselves off from the potential for real growth and transformation. Perhaps the most compelling modern thinker on this subject is Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who explored the profound role of suffering in the search for meaning. Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps led him to conclude that it was not suffering itself that determined a person's ability to survive, but the meaning they attached to it. He famously wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." For Frankl, the meaning we find in suffering is what determines our response to it. Without meaning, suffering becomes a weight that crushes us. With meaning, it becomes a force that propels us forward. Frankl's work challenges us to reconsider our entire approach to pain. Rather than seeing suffering as something to avoid at all costs, he suggests that we can learn to find meaning within it. When we stop running from pain and instead learn to sit with it, we open ourselves up to deeper layers of self-awareness, to new perspectives on life, and to the possibility of transformation. The problem, then, is not pain itself, it's our inability to embrace it. Pain, when understood and integrated, is not something to be feared. It is the force that can help us break free from the constraints of our limited beliefs and show us a new way of living. But to experience this, we must first break the cultural and psychological conditioning that has led us to see pain as the enemy. This brings us to the next critical question. What happens when we refuse to confront our suffering? What are the consequences of ignoring the lessons pain is trying to teach us? How does this denial shape the way we live our lives? And what does it cost us in the long run? The answers to these questions lie not just in the personal, but in the broader societal forces that continue to reinforce this avoidance of pain. But before we can understand the unseen consequences of this denial, we must first understand the power of pain itself, the way it shapes our behavior, our identity, and ultimately our future. Now that we've explored the philosophical and psychological roots of our aversion to pain, it's time to examine the far-reaching consequences of this denial. What happens when we refuse to confront the pain in our lives? When we continuously seek to avoid discomfort at all costs? The repercussions are not just personal. They ripple outward, shaping entire societies, cultures, and even our very understanding of what it means to be human. At the core of this issue lies a simple yet profound truth. When we refuse to acknowledge the lessons in our suffering, we are left to repeat the same patterns over and over again. Every time we avoid confronting our pain, whether it's emotional, psychological, or even physical, we allow it to fester beneath the surface. This unresolved pain doesn't disappear. Instead, it manifests in subtle, yet powerful ways, influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships in ways we often fail to recognize. Take, for instance, the impact of repressed emotional pain. When you bury your emotions, whether it's grief, anger, guilt, or shame, you create a psychological void, a chasm between the person you present to the world and the truth of who you are beneath the surface. This dissonance between your outer persona and your inner reality creates tension, stress, and anxiety. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more you push down on it, the more forcefully it will eventually pop back up. This unresolved emotional pain can lead to a host of psychological issues, chronic anxiety, depression, or even physical ailments, as the body manifests the pain it's been forced to carry. But the consequences don't stop there. As we continue to reject pain, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to grow emotionally and spiritually. Imagine, for a moment, that every painful experience in your life, every failure, every heartbreak, every loss holds a gift, a lesson about who you are and what you are capable of. But when we run from these lessons, we deny ourselves the chance to evolve. We stay stuck in old patterns, repeating the same mistakes over and over again, unable to break free from the cycle of suffering. On a societal level, this denial of pain manifests in more subtle but equally dangerous ways. The modern world, particularly in consumer-driven cultures, has created a space where suffering is to be avoided at all costs. We are taught to numb our pain with distractions, food, entertainment, shopping, social media, and even substances, anything to keep us from facing the discomfort within. We live in a time of instant gratification, where patience and delayed gratification have become rare virtues. The very nature of our society encourages us to resist discomfort and seek out pleasure at every turn. This consumerist approach to pain avoidance has far-reaching implications. We become disconnected not only from our own inner world, but from the world around us. We treat our emotions like problems to be solved rather than experiences to be understood. We treat our suffering as a nuisance to be eliminated rather than a signal of deep existential truths that are begging for our attention. And this disconnect breeds a society that is emotionally shallow, spiritually bankrupt, and perpetually seeking, but never finding true fulfillment. Think about it. How many times have you tried to fix your pain without ever truly understanding it? How many times have you sought external solutions, whether it's through relationships, work, or possessions, hoping they would fill the emptiness inside? And yet, when those things fail to satisfy, the pain returns, often stronger than before, urging you to address it from a deeper place. This cycle of avoidance and temporary relief is a hallmark of modern life. But it comes with a high cost, a life spent chasing after fleeting distractions, never fully engaging with the truths that suffering holds. The neurological and cognitive science behind this avoidance is equally revealing. When we choose to ignore pain, we activate the brain's reward system, flooding it with temporary pleasure in an effort to mask the discomfort. However, this act of avoidance creates a feedback loop. The more we avoid, the stronger our brain's desire for quick relief becomes, pushing us further into cycles of addiction, procrastination, and self-sabotage. In a sense, we become trapped in a self-perpetuating loop of emotional numbness, unable to break free from the patterns of avoidance that have taken root in our minds. Moreover, the societal pressure to appear happy, successful, and put together adds another layer of complexity to this issue. In a world dominated by social media, where everyone's best moments are on display for all to see, we are constantly comparing ourselves to idealized versions of other people's lives. The pressure to maintain this facade of happiness leads many of us to suppress our true emotions even more deeply. We may feel compelled to put on a smile even when we are hurting inside, afraid that others will judge us if we reveal the vulnerability and pain we are carrying. This cultural stigma around pain, the notion that suffering is something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of, perpetuates the cycle of avoidance, leaving us with a false sense of security and a deep sense of isolation. But what are the long-term consequences of all this avoidance? For one, we become emotionally disconnected from ourselves and others. We learn to mask our true feelings, creating a facade of happiness while our inner world quietly deteriorates. Relationships, too, suffer as a result of this denial of pain. How many times have you stayed in toxic relationships, avoiding the pain of confrontation, fearing the discomfort of being alone, only to find yourself deeper in the cycle of emotional depletion? The more we avoid confronting the pain in our relationships, the miscommunications, the unresolved conflicts, the unspoken fears, the more we perpetuate the toxic dynamics that keep us trapped. In the long run, this avoidance of pain leads to a loss of self-awareness. We forget who we truly are, because we never allow ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions. Pain, in its rawest form, is a doorway to self-discovery. It's the light that shines on the darkest parts of ourselves, forcing us to confront what we have long ignored. But when we refuse to face it, we close off the path to true understanding and growth. So, what's the cost of all this denial? It's a life half lived, a journey cut short, and a potential left untapped. By refusing to engage with our pain, We deny ourselves the chance to heal, to grow, and to evolve into the people we are meant to be. The question now becomes, how do we break free from this cycle of avoidance? How can we embrace pain rather than run from it? And finally allow ourselves to experience the profound transformation it holds in store? That's where we go next. The rebellion against this cycle begins with a radical shift in perspective, a new way of looking at pain and suffering that can set you on the path to real freedom. Let's explore how we can break free from this trap and use pain as the very force that leads us toward our greatest transformation. Here's the truth. If you want to break free from the cycle of avoiding pain, you must first be willing to face it head-on. This may sound paradoxical, but it's the only way to reclaim control over your life. The very thing you've been running from, the discomfort, the emotional turmoil, the suffering, holds the key to your freedom. The path to liberation begins with an act of rebellion, choosing to confront your pain rather than flee from it. The first step in this rebellion is to stop seeing pain as something inherently negative. In our culture, we've been conditioned to view suffering as the enemy. We think of pain as something to be avoided at all costs, as if it's the ultimate indicator that something is wrong with us. But what if that assumption is the very thing keeping us trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage? What if pain, in its rawest form, is the most powerful teacher you'll ever encounter? Think back to moments of deep suffering in your life, whether it was the end of a relationship, the loss of a loved one, or a painful personal failure. Those moments, though excruciating, were often the moments that spurred your greatest growth. Pain is not an obstacle on the path to happiness. It's the very catalyst for transformation. If you are willing to face it with courage, it can be the spark that ignites the fire of personal evolution. Take, for example, Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the will to power. According to Nietzsche, suffering is not something we should try to avoid. Rather, it's an opportunity to transcend our limitations. When we embrace suffering, we don't just survive. We transform. Pain reveals our true capacity for strength, resilience, and wisdom. Every time we face pain and choose to grow from it, we expand the boundaries of who we are. In Nietzsche's eyes, pain is not just a teacher, it is the crucible in which we are forged into our highest selves. This shift in perspective is radical. Instead of running from pain, you begin to see it as a necessary part of your personal journey. You stop fighting the inevitable discomfort that comes with being human and start seeing it as an invitation to dig deeper, to understand more fully, and to grow stronger. The pain you've been avoiding becomes a doorway, a threshold between the person you are now and the person you are destined to become. But how exactly do you begin to embrace pain in this way? The first step is to cultivate the willingness to sit with your discomfort, to allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding. This means acknowledging the pain without judgment, without the urge to fix it, and without the desire to escape. It's a practice of radical acceptance. When you allow yourself to feel your pain fully, without resistance, you create space for healing to begin. You begin to see that pain is not something that needs to be fixed, but something that needs to be understood. A powerful tool for embracing pain is mindfulness. By practicing mindfulness, you become more aware of your internal experience and less caught up in the stories your mind tells you about the pain. Mindfulness allows you to observe your suffering without becoming consumed by it. It helps you recognize that the pain is not who you are. It is something that is passing through you. You are not your pain. You are the witness to it. And in that space of observation, you can start to untangle the lessons that your pain holds for you. Another critical aspect of this rebellion is reframing your suffering. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, introduced the concept of logotherapy, a therapeutic approach based on finding meaning in suffering. According to Frankl, the key to survival, both physically and emotionally, was the ability to find meaning in one's pain. He argued that even in the most dire circumstances, we can choose how to respond to our suffering. We may not have control over the pain itself, but we have control over how we interpret it. This idea is liberating. When you begin to view pain not as something that happens to you, but as something you can assign meaning to, you shift your entire relationship with it. Pain becomes a teacher, a guide that leads you through the dark corridors of your psyche. You begin to ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can this experience expand my capacity for compassion, resilience, or wisdom? Think of the countless historical figures who have transformed their suffering into a source of strength. Take Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, enduring physical and psychological torture. Rather than letting his suffering break him, Mandela used it as a source of inner strength and clarity. He came to view his suffering as a tool for personal transformation, and in turn, he became a beacon of hope for millions. His ability to reframe his pain and see it as part of a larger mission is what allowed him to transcend the oppressive circumstances that sought to destroy him. This shift in perspective is not easy. It requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. But it is also incredibly powerful. When you stop running from your pain and begin to face it head-on, you reclaim your power. You stop being a passive victim of your circumstances and become an active participant in your own growth. You begin to see that pain, in all its forms, is not something to be feared, but something to be welcomed. How do you begin this process in your own life? Start by identifying the areas where you've been avoiding pain. Perhaps it's in your relationships, your career, or your emotional health. Wherever you've been resisting discomfort, that's where the work begins. Instead of seeking immediate relief, allow yourself to feel the discomfort fully. Ask yourself what this pain is trying to teach you. What does it reveal about your deepest fears, desires, and unmet needs? Allow yourself to sit in that discomfort long enough to discover the lessons it holds. This doesn't mean that you will never seek pleasure, comfort, or joy again. It simply means that you no longer run from the difficult emotions or painful experiences that are an inevitable part of being human. You become willing to face your pain, knowing that it holds the potential for profound growth. You stop being afraid of it and start seeing it as a trusted guide, leading you toward a deeper, more authentic life. So, what does it mean to rebel against the avoidance of pain? It means choosing to face your suffering with courage and acceptance, knowing that in doing so, you are unlocking the door to your truest self. The rebellion is not against pain itself, but against the idea that you must run from it. Pain is not your enemy. It is your greatest teacher if you're willing to listen. As you move forward, remember that this journey of embracing pain is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process, a continual practice of surrender and growth. And as you break free from the cycle of avoidance, you will find that your pain, once feared and resisted, becomes the very thing that propels you toward your fullest potential. Now that you've taken the first step in this rebellion, let's explore the final, most powerful realization one. That will completely shift your understanding of pain and suffering. It's the truth that, when fully embraced, can transform your entire perspective on life. As you stand at the precipice of this journey, you might begin to feel the weight of something profound. something that has been lurking beneath the surface of your pain all along. You have rebelled. You have faced your suffering, embraced it, and allowed it to shape you. But now, there is one final revelation, a truth that will turn everything you thought you knew upside down. And in doing so, bring clarity and understanding to all that you've experienced. Here it is. The ultimate realization is this: your pain is not an obstacle. It is the path. Suffering, in its most honest and raw form, is not something you must overcome, but something you must walk through. Pain is not the interruption of your life. It is the very heartbeat of it. Think about this. What if the entire narrative we've been taught, that pain is something to be avoided, that suffering must be fixed, was simply wrong? What if suffering isn't something you need to escape from, but something you need to fully experience in order to awaken to your true potential? This is where the transformation happens, when you stop seeing pain as a disruption, when you stop seeing it as the thing that shouldn't be there. You free yourself from the very chains that have bound you for so long. Pain, in this context, becomes the vehicle for transcendence, the very force that propels you forward. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in psychology, proposed that the integration of our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we repress and try to avoid, was the key to achieving wholeness. Jung didn't view suffering as an enemy to be conquered, but as a necessary component of personal transformation. He believed that it's through facing our pain, accepting the darkness within, that we come to know the full extent of our being. The shadow is not something that should be feared or rejected, but something that, when acknowledged and embraced, leads us to our most authentic selves. What Jung understood is this: pain is not random or meaningless. It is a guide leading you toward something greater. Every moment of suffering, every heartbreak, every failure, carries the seeds of transformation. It is through the lens of pain that you can see clearly, not just the world around you, but the world within you. The pain that you feared, the wounds you've tried to avoid, are the places where your greatest growth occurs. Consider Viktor Frankl once again. After enduring unimaginable suffering in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, Frankl found that those who survived the horrors of the camps were often the ones who could find meaning in their suffering. He wrote about this in his seminal book Man's Search for Meaning, where he describes how finding purpose in pain was the key to resilience and survival. Frankl understood that pain, when given meaning, becomes a vehicle for transformation. Pain, in this sense, is not the end of the story, but the beginning of something greater. This realization that pain is not an obstacle, but a path, can completely change the way you approach every aspect of your life. The next time you face hardship, you won't see it as something to be avoided or feared. Instead, you will see it as an opportunity to step into a deeper level of understanding. You will begin to view your struggles not as interruptions, but as invitations to evolve. The next time you face emotional turmoil, you will remember that it is a doorway to a new level of consciousness. The next time you experience failure or rejection, you will recognize that these moments are teaching you invaluable lessons about your true nature. And the next time you encounter grief or loss, you will understand that these experiences are the very soil in which your deepest wisdom is nurtured. The ultimate realization is not that pain is to be eliminated or avoided, but that pain is the means by which we awaken to who we are meant to be. This truth is both liberating and humbling. It reminds you that the universe doesn't conspire against you, it conspires with you. Every difficulty you face, every wound you carry, is part of a larger process of growth. The discomfort you feel is not a punishment, but a necessary step on the journey to greater clarity, wisdom, and authenticity. But there is an even deeper layer to this realization. As you begin to understand that pain is the path, you will also come to understand that the very nature of your being is not separate from this suffering. You are, in essence, pain and joy intertwined. You cannot experience one without the other. You cannot know peace without knowing struggle, nor can you experience love without knowing loss. They are the two sides of the same coin, inextricably connected. This is the paradox of the human condition. We are creatures of light and shadow, of bliss and suffering, of joy and sorrow. And it is in the tension between these extremes that we find our deepest truths. When we deny the darkness within us, we deny the light as well. When we resist pain, we resist the full potential of our being. But when we accept pain as part of the whole, we are liberated from the need for perfection and the fear of inadequacy. So, what does this mean for you, right now, in this moment? It means that you no longer have to resist your pain. You no longer have to run from it, or try to numb it with distractions. The next time you experience pain, whether physical, emotional, or existential, remember this truth. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are simply in the process of becoming. Every tear you shed, every moment of suffering, is a step toward your own transformation. And when you fully accept this, you will discover a strength within you that you never knew existed. You will realize that you are not defined by your pain, but by how you respond to it. You are defined by the choices you make in the face of suffering. And in this choice lies your power. This final truth, pain, as the path, reframes everything. It turns your suffering into something sacred, something essential to your growth. It liberates you from the fear of pain, and in doing so, it liberates you from the fear of living fully. No longer will you shrink from the challenges that life presents. Instead, you'll step forward, knowing that every step, no matter how painful, is leading you to your highest potential. So, as you reflect on this journey, remember, pain is not the enemy. It is the teacher, the guide, and the path itself. And in the end, it is through embracing suffering that you will find your greatest strength and your truest self. Embrace the journey. Embrace the pain. It is the greatest gift you will ever receive.